Hello guys, welcome back to this fragrant corner of the internet. It's so nice to see you again. We are talking about cannabis perfumes today. There was quite a bit of interest in hearing more about cannabis fragrances, and so I've made a selection for you. Cannabis, has had a boom in the past few years. It's something that people have seemed to have become more and more interested in, especially with it being legalized in the US. But this is not the type of channel where we talk about CBD perfumes or any side effects. We are focusing solely on the scent. And cannabis in perfume is, of course, an interpretation. I know some people might think, why would I want to smell like weed? Or why would I want to smell like marijuana? But that's not what we're talking about here. It is a fragrant interpretation. So it's an accord created using the inspiration of cannabis and creating something that hopefully smells really nice to some people. Cannabis has been kind of thrown in as a note in lots of various perfumes where you think, I don't really smell much cannabis in it. So in this video, we're going to talk about more of the cannabis pure perfumes. So number one, the first fragrance we have is Cannabis Santal by Fresh. This is a brand that pretty much creates not non-perfumes, but very, very light perfumes. They're basically for people who can't handle real perfume or maybe don't like heavy perfumes. You would go out to Fresh and try to find a fragrance. So this fragrance is probably the weightiest fragrance from the Fresh range. It's also my personal favorite from Fresh because it is the weightiest perfume. The others are just too light and fleeting for me. But Cannabis Santal is a nice fresh cannabis fragrance, one that you can just spray all over the place. It is inoffensive as well. It has a woody element to it, hence the Santal aspect of the name. And this one, I would just say, is more like smelling the green plant in itself. I haven't smelled the green plant itself, but how I imagine smelling the green plant is in itself. It's more of a leafy take on the cannabis, and then with that infusion of the woods as well. The next fragrance we have in this cannabis selection is Cannabis by Malin and Goetz. This one is a notch heavier than the previous cannabis from Fresh. It still is, it's like another brand that focuses on natural and apothecary style, and it seems like carefree. Their perfumes aren't what I would say like the haute couture of fragrance, but they are very nice and wearable and unisex and pleasant. So this one also has a lot of patchouli in it and also has sandalwood to try to build up this cannabis accord. It is also a spicier fragrance, so this fragrance has black pepper in there as well. And I think that people would probably on the mainstream market say that this smells quite masculine. But I like this one. This is a nice wearable cannabis. These two are like no-brainers if you're trying to introduce yourself to cannabis and perfumes. The next fragrance that we have is from the brand 1969. It is called Purple Haze. And this one, based on the name, I guess would be inspired by, the time period when people were into using the cannabis plant to smoke it a lot, and hence being in the purple haze. It incorporates more notes than the previous two cannabis perfumes, so it also has herbs in there, it has thyme, and it has cypress as well to begin with. So it's a perfume that tries to put you in that state of mind of lots of things going on inside this haze. This fragrance is also patchouli heavy, so I definitely think that cannabis is a nice segue for people who already know that they enjoy patchouli. Now, along these lines of a hazier cannabis perfume, we have Haze by Akro. This fragrance is quite delightful. It's quite meditative. It's green. It has some interesting notes thrown in there as well as absinthe. It's got some herbal clary sage. It's got some mint in there. It just is a mellow, green, earthy fragrance to me. And Boyce 1920 has an entire line of 3 fragrances that are cannabis based, but with each, their own particular twist. So the first one that they have, and these samples were kindly provided by Scent City. I will leave their details down below. The first one that we have is Cannabis Fruttata, so a fruity cannabis infused with some blueberry and ambergris. This one I find to be quite straightforward cannabis for me. I don't get much fruitiness from this fragrance. It's definitely an herbal fragrance. I get lots of rosemary and oregano, and then it dries down with quite a bit of that patchouli, cedar and ambergris combination. So it is slightly mimicking that haziness as well. So yeah, despite the name, I don't find it overly fruity at all. I find it more herbal and then with ambergris around it. The next one in the Boyce line is Cannabis Salata. So it's salty cannabis. This one has a marine accord in it. So for those of you who are fans of a marine type accord, this definitely smells like sea salt for the most part, and then with a little infusion of the cannabis, so that patchouli herbal accord pulled into the melange. This one has spices thrown in there as well to add some interest. It has coriander and cardamom. So this one, you know, is very, very marine-like to start off with, then goes a little bit more spicy as it dries down, and then with that ambergris encasing as well. Then we have cannabis, which is just that, based around cannabis itself and patchouli and woods, and no twists, no fruitiness, no marine-like accords. This one smells a lot like a plant to begin with. This is like you're in the depths of this green plant. Very, very leafy, very, very realistic cannabis-like in my imagination, because again, I have not smelled the actual plants, but yes, you are just crunching in those leaves of the cannabis plant. It's a little bit more linear than the first two fragrances, but if you are looking for a leafy cannabis interpretation, then this one is for you. The next fragrance that we have is a playful, fun, joyful take on the cannabis accord. It is called Stunned, and it is by Bel Rebel. And this one is like some unforeseen alien interpretation of cannabis, because cannabis is thrown in with candy floss. You have cotton candy, very sweet and fluffy and syrupy, and then you have the green cannabis accord as well, and it's all mixed together, but somehow it works. I don't know how they do it. Bel Rebel creates fun scents where, you know, they take concepts and they drive them fully, like that's why they're called Rebel, right? They're rebellious. So Stunned, I feel like you would either love or you would hate. If you love a nice candy-like fragrance, then this would be a fun way of incorporating cannabis into that. I wouldn't say that it smells like straight up, you know, cannabis plant the way some of these other fragrances do, but it has that fun patchouli edge to it that makes it quite cool. The next fragrance that we have is probably my personal favorite out of the line of cannabis perfumes that I've spoken about, because it's just so easy to wear and does remind me of cannabis at the same time. And it is Cannabis Intense by Fragrance du Bois. This is actually one of my preferred Fragrance du Bois fragrances. When I smelled this at first, I found it to be interesting. And they also have a blue one, Cannabis Blue, but that one I find hard to pull off personally, because I associate blue fragrances with men, and that's just, society has, you know, done that to me. But if you like a blue fragrance, then definitely try out Cannabis Blue. That one is quite popular. But Cannabis Intense, I would say, is an easy wear for anybody. It's in a parfum concentration according to Fragrance du Bois, but I wear this more like an EDT. Like, I can just spray this without any offense whatsoever. So do not be scared off by it being called Cannabis and Intense and being a parfum. So this cannabis as well, I would say wears like a patchouli fragrance would, and it's woody and it's spicy at the same time. So it's kind of that genre that a lot of people, I feel, would be able to wear. It's patchouli-esque and it's also spicy. The oud in here is minimal, so I wouldn't call this a heavy oud fragrance for that matter either. So this is just that type of genre that I feel that a lot of people would get a lot of wear out. So try this one, Cannabis Intense. And now lastly, we have Black Afghano by Nasomatto. This one I feel like I was inclined to keep in this list, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Black Afghano myself. It's a very popular fragrance. To me, this smells more like a person who has smoked some form of cannabis, but like 2 or 3 days later, along the way, they rolled into perhaps some dirt. They haven't showered. It has a mystique to it, okay? So it has a smokiness to it, and it has this heavy mystique that I assume people would find attractive somehow. Black Afghano is the type of fragrance that smells slightly different to everybody, so it could be just me. Definitely try out this fragrance if you are looking for a cannabis perfume that is on the dark, heavy side, but not cannabis dominant, I would say, and incorporated cannabis. So that's it for the cannabis fragrance selection. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. Please leave me your feedback. Which cannabis dominant fragrances have I missed? Leave your comments down below, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks for watching.